Canada keeps the border shut for another month. Who gets to be New York City's mayor, or who wants to be New York City's mayor? And the NFL has its first openly gay active player. Tuesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for June 22nd. As you can hear, I'm Carlo Versano, and I'm here with Baker Machado, who is filling in for Jill. Jill's out on vacation for the rest of the week. Baker, I got to say, man, I'm officially giving you our six-man award. You come off the bench when we need you. You don't complain. You put up numbers every time.
Oh, yes.
You don't get any of the accolades, but you do it. And we appreciate you.
I'm just happy somebody is recognizing this, Carlo. I'm so happy, obviously, to always be here. And yes, anytime I can take this over from Joe Wagner and it can be just the two of us, I'm always happy to be here.
The boys are back, baby.
Yes, indeed. Carlo, we got a lot to get to, so let's dive straight into some of the big headlines. And let's start up north. In Canada, travel restrictions are falling across much of the world, at least in countries where COVID is receding. But that's not so much the case in Canada. Our neighbor to the north extending their border closure with the U.S. and Mexico, now at least until July the 21st, Carlo. They're continuing a ban on non-essential international travel that threatens to harm the country's economy. Now, Canadian officials are saying these restrictions can't be lifted until about 75% of the population is then fully vaccinated. And right now, they're far way away from that, Carlo. According to official data, just 15% of eligible Canadians have received both doses. Incredibly small numbers there.
Yeah, well, they're doing do the one shot first and worry about the second later, which is potentially helpful in some ways, but it's going to make it a long time until they can get to that 75% number. So it's a little bit absurd. I mean, look at these numbers. There's 11,000 active COVID cases in Canada, which is a country with a population of 38 million. They had 11 deaths yesterday. So they're not exactly in the middle of a surge here. So one might argue that this is a little much. That being said, it's a much more encouraging picture in the U.S., even if we're not going to hit that 70% goal of President Biden's of getting 70% of people fully vaccinated by the 4th of July. According to the latest numbers from the White House, more than 150 million Americans, I should say, are now fully vaccinated. We'd be in bad shape if it were just 150. Oh, yeah. We are approaching 50% of the population being fully vaccinated here. Daily deaths in this country have fallen below 300 for the first time since the earliest days of the pandemic. So can't stress enough what good news that is. One quick thing I did want to mention yesterday, Jill and I were talking about this idea of these two Americas that people are worried about now, about with these pockets of vaccine hesitancy. Yes. Look at Mesa County, Colorado. Hospitalizations in that county surging now. They have a vaccination rate less than 50%. They're dealing with this Delta variant, which is much more contagious. This is a quote from Colorado Springs Gazette. Officials estimate that roughly 1 in 86 residents in the Mesa County region have been infected with the virus and can spread it. So, I know I'm a broken record here. It's not like people are going to listen to me to get vaccinated. I'm sure most, if not all of our audience is vaccinated, but this is just, an example of what happens when those vaccination rates aren't high enough.
Well, just, being a Colorado kid, just Mesa County, by the way, that is Lauren Boebert's congressional district, just to put that into all context, just in terms of the people that represent that place as well. And Carlo, in terms of two Americas, I mean, look at Vermont, for instance. Vermont's numbers are absolutely insane. According to the New York Times, 84% of people in Vermont have at least one dose of the vaccine, but it is a completely different story in the South right now. Mississippi, that number is 45%. This is why so many people are so concerned about the Delta variant spreading rapidly, especially in the South, where you then have basically two Americas, where you have basically one part that is doing well with the virus and another where it's basically going to surge all over again.
Yep. I'm actually surprised it's that high in Mississippi.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, good point. Meanwhile, Carlo, the airline industry is struggling mightily amid the pickup in travel. For one, incidents involving unruly passengers have been soaring since more people have started taking back to the skies. That, according to the FAA. A group representing the airlines and their unions now asking the federal government now to get involved in prosecuting some of those passengers. Meanwhile, big carriers like American are now canceling hundreds of flights through mid-July. That's due in part to a labor shortage that's making it incredibly difficult to meet the skyrocketing demand that's out there, Carlo.
Yeah, United Airlines just came out yesterday, said they have a pilot shortage. They may have to start canceling flights. If there's one industry for which I just cannot work up the energy to get fired up about their labor shortage issues, it's the airlines. I mean, the airline industry furloughed tens of thousands of people this time last year. American Airlines spent $13 billion on stock buybacks and dividends since 2014. That's all money that they could have invested back into their workforce, into their infrastructure. They could have tried to pandemic-proof their whole business model, but they didn't. They gave it to their investors. Last year, that company cut 19,000 workers. They got $5.8 billion in government bailout money. So cry me a river a little bit. One thing these guys could do, I hate to say it, raise wages. I mean, maybe you'll get more people who want to work there and subject themselves to the absolute worst human behavior imaginable, since flying is apparently the one place where all societal norms have just completely gone out the window in the last, decade or so.
I don't know about, I mean, I know you've been very busy, Carlo, with baby life and everything, but I don't know if you've been on an airplane.
It's been a long time since I've been in an airport.
Yeah, so I went to the airport in an airplane for my first time a few weeks ago, and it was like an insane experience. So take like your typical normal like holiday going to the airport and then multiply it by 2, because you have everybody that's basically a mess. You have people screaming at the people that work at the airport because of mask mandates and stuff like that. Some will say, listen, I don't need to have to wear my mask because I'm vaccinated, or I don't believe in wearing a mask, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And then on top of that, Carlo, the prices for tickets are actually going up. I mean, it cost me over $1,000 for a ticket in coach to go to Colorado, which normally would cost me half of that. It is insane how expensive it is getting right now to like go fly anywhere. And it's going to be interesting because demand is so high right now. Does that sort of taper off as maybe more people decide, I'm just going to do a road trip now, and because the tickets are so crazy?
Right. I didn't realize that. I mean, I knew that everything else was getting expensive. I sort of had assumed that airline tickets were somewhat less so, but I guess not.
And they're not going down, Carlo, and this is why, and you have airlines, as you mentioned, cutting flights as a result, but still not cutting down the price on a lot of these things. Carlo, let's move here to a more New York City-centric story, because the world and the universe really revolves around us. Residents here in New York City going to the polls today, going to vote for the next mayor as both parties hold their primaries today. But really, the results of the Democratic mayoral primary, that's going to be the big one. That's all going to be assure who's going to be in charge of steering the economy through the country's largest city. This election, Carlo, the most high-profile experiment yet. We've got ranked choice voting. Voters basically asked to rank their top 5 choices for each office, theoretically giving everyone more of a say on who is elected. And it's been really funny watching all of the candidates essentially say, pick me number 1, but pick this other person number 2 if you can. I've never seen that before in politics ever.
The ranked choice voting thing is really interesting. I'll be very curious to see if it appears to work, if people seem to like it. It's confusing. I mean, it confuses me, and I'm relatively read in on this stuff. So I assume that there's a lot of people who won't really understand what to do. There hasn't been really good messaging on it. The latest polling, and I don't want to stick on this too long because I know most people listening don't live in New York City. But that being said, it is New York City, and what happens here does actually affect the rest of the country. So just quickly here, the latest polling has Eric Adams. He's a former NYPD cop. He's the former Brooklyn Borough President, or he's the current Brooklyn Borough President. He's in the lead. Andrew Yang, who was the early favorite, he's been losing steam. He came out of the gate real hot, mostly just due to name recognition, since he's already run for president and for some reason has decided to run for mayor. But the big news, the race is remarkably wide open, which is very rare for a New York City mayoral election. Usually you sort of know who's going to win these things before they even happen. So I won't bore you with my thoughts on these utterly unremarkable cast of characters. If you want my endorsement, you can email me. But again, just to the smart money's on Adams. He's arguably the law and order candidate. He was endorsed by the New York Post, which tells you something. That's notable. That's notable for one reason, which is just showing how much the culture has shifted in the last year as urban crime has risen. If you asked me last June if the next New York City mayor was likely to be the one endorsed by the New York Post, who has called for funding the police more, I would say that's
Republican,
just not,
mind you, also.
Yes. Great point. I would have said that's not happening, but it shows you that Crime matters, especially in local elections. But mayor of New York City, probably one of, if not the worst job in national politics. It's not a springboard to anything, right?
No.
When was the last time a New York City mayor has become president? I don't think it's ever happened.
No. I mean, some have run for it.
Yes, exactly. Not very well. You don't get a national platform. The city is basically controlled by the real estate industry. You exist mostly as like a human avatar for other New Yorkers to yell at on the street when they're upset about garbage or crime or whatever. Sometimes they let you cut ribbons. But yeah, I wouldn't take New York City mayor if you gave me that job.
It would be an incredibly difficult job. You mentioned Eric Adams, the front runner. The only thing I would temper expectations here is Eric Adams is not hitting anywhere close to 40% in polls. Also, with the ranked choice voting, we might not find out the winner, Carlo, until the middle of July is now what they're essentially saying here. So this could be a very long time before we find out who the next mayor of this city is going to be. Also, keep an eye out for Catherine Garcia. She basically ran the sanitation department here in New York City. She basically has been neck and neck with Andrew Yang and Eric Adams towards the top of the polls. She's going to be another one I'm going to keep my eyes out on. But yeah, it's fascinating to think that, the city with de Blasio, which ran against Michael Bloomberg and who he was as a candidate, now the city essentially now running against Bill de Blasio. So this is going to be interesting to sort of see the swaying of what happens here. I
believe Andrew Yang was the only one of the 10 or so candidates running that said that he would have actually taken an endorsement from Bill de Blasio as the sitting mayor.
Yes, but the New York Times actually interestingly wrote last week that de Blasio might be pulling the strings for Eric Adams in the background, which is also interesting given the fact that Adams has not sought his endorsement whatsoever. Meanwhile, a Pride Month miracle, Carlo, in pro sports. I can't believe at 36 I'm finally going to be able to say this, but we now have our first openly gay active NFL player. Congratulations to Carl Nassib. The Raiders defensive lineman wrote on social media yesterday, quote, "I just want to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I finally feel comfortable enough to get it off my chest." He continued saying, "I just think that representation and visibility are so important. I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are not necessary anymore." Now, he concluded by announcing that he's donating $100,000 to the Trevor Project, which is an amazing organization. It is an LGBT nonprofit that focuses on suicide prevention, especially for young adolescents out there. And the NFL and the Raiders also quickly put out statements saying that they stand with Nassib as well. Roger Goodell also echoing the statement from Nassib saying, I hope that this doesn't become, as big of a deal, but we're so excited that it is right now. And having all said that, Carlo, I have waited my whole life to see something like this. We've seen players come out that are active, like Jason Collins in the NBA, Robbie Rogers in Major League Soccer, but never an active player. A lot of players either came out before, like they were drafted, or afterwards after they've retired, but never during the season. So this is an incredible moment here.
Michael Sam would be the highest profile example of that in the NFL.
But never played it down.
He came out. Exactly. He came out in 2014. That was a huge story. He was drafted, I believe, by the Cowboys, but he was cut. He never
the Rams. He was drafted by the St. Louis Rams.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And then by the way, he was cut and then signed by the Cowboys, but also never ended up playing for them either. But Michael Sams was amazing because he was drafted in the 7th round, and I still will remember this for the rest of my life. Him kissing his boyfriend on national television when he got drafted. It was just an amazing moment, and I thought that was the moment we turned the corner. But it's sad because the former SEC Defensive Player of the Year, Michael Sam, couldn't make it in the NFL, which goes to show how difficult it is to stay in this industry. And look, I'm so incredibly excited for Carl, and I think he's going to, become a huge, he's got this huge platform now to really talk about being LGBT in the NFL, which is, it's a hyper-masculine sport. So having somebody that's part of the LGBT community, huge there. But I do want to continue to say what he said. Visibility is so important here. Yes, I want us to get to a point where coming out moments like this are not as big of a deal, but I still want people to be able to have that opportunity to say that about themselves. Because again, visibility is such a huge moment.
That's a great point. And I actually think that what I was going to say was, to me, the most interesting thing will be to watch, has been watching the media coverage. Michael Sam, that happened in 2014. That was 7 years ago. There's a huge deal. I think he was on 60 Minutes. He was on the cover of the New York Times.
He was.
national story. Will this even be a story tomorrow? And if it isn't that a fantastic thing in a lot of ways? The way that the culture has changed on gay rights in the last
crazy.
decade is it's unbelievable.
Not even
when you
in the
think
last
about it.
decade, but just in the last few years also
Yeah.
to have a moment like this.
I mean, don't forget, Obama ran for president against same-sex marriage.
I know.
Right? I mean,
It was because of Joe Biden that he changed his perspective.
Yeah. Exactly. You just talk about some of these sort of social issues that, I mean, look about interracial marriage. Gallup doesn't even poll on that question anymore. I think 20 years ago, the majority of Americans said that they were against interracial marriage. So it just shows you the culture changes. It changes so fast. In some ways, it's really scary, I think, for a lot of people. But in some ways like this, I don't think anybody really cares about this. And I mean that in the best way possible. I mean, I did a search for Nassib's name on Twitter this morning. I didn't see anything that said of people saying like coming out against him. Everyone was just like, yeah, man, you do you. That's fantastic.
And you know what? You bring up such a valid point, because I was the same. I would have thought he was the #1 trending story ever because of what happened with Michael Sam. The argument against Michael Sam was that we in the media made too much of a big deal about his sexual orientation, that we put even more pressure on him to try to make it in the NFL, and as a result, it didn't work out. So, you know, I totally get that it goes both ways, but either way, that for this to happen during Pride Month is an amazing moment. I do want to stick with sports here for a moment. The Supreme Court, a unanimous, crazy decision coming yesterday, but one we all expected was going to happen, ruled in favor of college athletes being allowed to finally receive relatively modest payments related to their education. The case was very narrowly focused, meaning it didn't touch on whether or not student athletes should be paid for competing, either through endorsement deals or directly through the NCAA. But this was a ruling, Carlo, we have been waiting for a very long time to finally happen.
Yeah, 9-0. And some of the justices' written opinions, especially a rather fiery concurrence from Brett Kavanaugh, suggests to me that I think that they're probably open to taking a bigger case and making a landmark decision on the matter of student athletes being paid in the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a case like that in the coming years. The immediate question, just with this case, and again, very, very narrowly focused, but the question to me is whether this ruling can get exploited. Can colleges start to do things like say, hey, you know, I'm going to lure this recruit by telling them we can get them a great job after college, right? Is that a way sort of, you know, to use this in their favor? The Supreme Court probably does need to step in here and make a ruling one way or another, because it is going to be sort of, as I read one commenter say, it's just going to be the Wild West out here without a real, you know, body coming in and saying, can these kids be paid? I used to be actually against the idea of student athletes getting paid. I've turned sort of, I'm at least agnostic, if not in the realm of supporting it now. You know, I guess there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to profit off their talents like anybody else. I think really a lot of people have
evolved on this, Carlo. I don't think you're the only one here, because I think the original thought was you're getting, you know, a free college tuition for a lot of these kids. Major universities, like you would think that would be enough, but especially with the internet and how branding has basically evolved, and how a lot of these kids are making huge, you know, Reggie Bush, remember how big of a deal he was when he was at USC. You know, why can't they be able to do that? Why, for instance, why would I be able to do that in college, but, you know, if I was in television, but a kid that's, you know, a student athlete wouldn't be able to. Yeah. But I just feel like this was where things were going to anyway. And this is also going to force maybe a lot of kids now to maybe stay in college. Think of how many kids, either if the NBA basically only incentivizes you to only go to college for 1 year and then you can go to the pros, maybe will this allow more kids to want to stay in college sports now, because they know now that they can actually stay and profit off of their name now.
Yeah, that would be a good thing, right? I mean, I don't like the idea of like the college, you know, team quarterback driving around campus in a Ferrari, I guess.
No, I get that. I understand that.
But I understand. I really have. I've come a long way on this issue.
But you also have to understand a lot of these kids, by the way, 95% of them not going to make it to professional sports. So this might be their only opportunity in their lifetime to ever make anything off of their name. That's a good point. I do want to switch gears and talk about a big change happening in Hollywood as well. And it's coming from Steven Spielberg, who is also very much evolved when it comes to the streaming world. He has inked a deal, his company, Amblin Entertainment, that will produce stuff for Netflix and potentially direct multiple streaming movies for the platform every year. The partnership between Amblin, Spielberg's production house, and Netflix, notable because Spielberg has always been known in Hollywood as something of a streaming critic. I should put a little bit of a caveat on this. He is going to be doing movies for Amblin that are streaming television movies, but any big theatrical release will still be part of his existing deal that he has with Universal. So it's not like Amblin is getting out of the theatrical business altogether, but either way, it's still significant.
Right. So like Jurassic World, which is like one of the big tentpoles for Spielberg's production house, that will still be in theaters when that comes out. It's not like an exclusive deal. He's going to make movies, particularly for Netflix. He's also going to make movies for theatrical release. But what's notable here, just a few years ago, he famously lobbied the Oscars to disallow Netflix from competing for awards after Roma won big. So it's just funny how times change, right? I mean, money, I guess it all comes down to money, right? Although Steven Spielberg probably has all the money in the world. So maybe it actually is something. He just wants his stuff to be seen by more people. I don't know.
Yeah, no, look, and we've seen that with a lot of big other famous directors as well who have criticized Netflix in the past, saying that they're not movies. What they're basically creating, that, you go to a movie to see it in a theater. You don't see it in a streaming network, on a streaming platform. But what the term for film has evolved so much over time, especially from the pandemic, given the fact that HBO Max was putting all of their big high-budget films on their streaming platforms simultaneously as they were in theaters at the same time. But you're right, Steven Spielberg has definitely evolved on this. He basically lobbied the Oscars for the longest time and the Academy to not have anything that was on a streaming platform that was not in a theater be eligible for Best Picture, and now he has definitely changed on that. Carlo, a drinking straw designed to instantly cure the hiccups appears to be enormously successful. That according to a medical study in which 90% of participants said the straw worked better than any home remedies that they tried. The Hiccup straw was invented by a doctor at the University of Texas who found that the extreme suction created by the straw helped reset the nerves that cause hiccups. This is interesting. The product is now available online for about $14.
This is, first of all, the most searched medical question in 2017 on Google, how to get rid of the hiccups. It's regularly ranked. It's regularly ranked among the most Googled terms. So clearly there was a business opportunity here that this guy saw and is probably about to become a trillionaire off. So I would try this. I don't really, this thing is sort of like a very rigid straw. The idea is you have to like suck really hard and then it does whatever it does to make you stop doing the hiccups. I mean, I would certainly try this. I don't have a go-to hiccup cure. I don't know if you do or not.
Well, no. I mean, I've always heard, hold your breath. I've always heard, a bunch of
Drink
different
from
things.
the side of your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That never end up working. Straws are such an interesting conversation, Carlo, because I consider myself to be a very environmentally friendly person, but if there's one thing that drives me crazy, it's that I can't have a plastic straw.
And don't get me started on that.
And that has definitely been something I've really tried to get so much better at, because I really feel like there hasn't been, paper straws just don't do the thing. I've had hay straws before. So my hope is that this hiccup straw also is environmentally friendly as well.
Well, it is.
So that way I don't feel as guilty about having it.
But do you want to be the guy who's carrying around his own personal straw at the restaurant? Like,
I know. And I've seen those people all over the place. And I want to say I care about the environment and I want to be so much better at it. But just a straw is every time I go to Starbucks, for instance, and they always ask me, do you want a straw? I always say yes. And then part of me always feels like, why did you do that? That's awful. Some turtle is going to be dying somewhere because of you. But honestly, don't take away my straws. I love my straws.
Yes. No, I agree. Well, look, I wanted to have a conversation about the hiccups here, but we didn't. You don't really have any good hiccup cures for me, Baker. So that being said, I want you guys. I want everyone to send us your homemade hiccup cures.
Please.
And I want to hear the good stuff that actually works. None of this nothing that you can just read on the internet. I want stuff. I want stuff that your parents taught you, that you're passing down. We'll read them on the pod this week. Email us your hiccup cures, Baker, and I will read them.
I can't wait.
Need2Know, the number 2 at cheddar.com, and make them good.
I can't wait. This is going to be great. I'm going to learn so much about the hiccups throughout this whole process. I'm never going to have hiccups again.
Our audience will deliver, as they always do. Okay, we're going long. That's what you guys need to know for Tuesday, June 22nd.